Good day. Today, I am pleased to present our study entitled Ecological Assessment and Tourism Carrying Capacity Determination of the Twin Lakes of San Pablo City. So I'm Vincent Pleto, an assistant professor at the Institute of Biological Sciences, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So Lakes Pandin and Yambo are famously known as the Twin Lakes of San Pablo. They are primarily for ecotourism purposes as many tourists visit these lakes to enjoy the scenic view and eat food while in the middle of the lake. However, with the continuous development on these lakes, it is essential to determine the current status by conducting an ecological assessment and determining its carrying capacity. So this study is a part of the Seven Lamps program or the Seven Lakes Assessment and Monitoring Program for Sustainable Lake Ecosystem. So the objectives of this study are the following: to assess the ecological status and biodiversity of the Twin Lakes, and to determine the carrying capacity of the lakes for sustainable ecotourism. So for the methodology, so we have three. First is to determine the water quality. Second is to determine the fish and macrophyte biodiversity. And lastly, to determine the carrying capacity of the two lakes. So for the water quality determinations, four stations were purposively identified. So the collection was done in 2019 and 2021. So in situ parameters were collected using a YSI multi-parameter sonde. So it includes dissolved oxygen, temperature, pH, conductivity, total dissolved solids, salinity, chlorophyll A, and nitrate. And second disc was used to determine the transparency of water. Then for the ex situ parameters, water were collected for phosphate, biochemical oxygen demand, and chemical oxygen demand for analysis in the laboratory. Then for the fish biodiversity, gill nets were set up for 12 hours to determine the fish catch on each lake, and the macrophytes found on the lakes were identified. Then for the carrying capacity determination, tourism carrying capacity and ecological carrying capacity were determined. So for the assessment of the tourism carrying capacity, the variables needed for computing carrying capacity were the size of the lake intended for tourism activities, the point of activities, the infrastructures and facilities available, and as well as the amenities for the tourists. So following the manual of Kalanog 2015 of the DNR ERDB, the determination of the carrying capacity was based on the Bullion's carrying capacity mathematical model, which determined the standard requirement of the visitor, such as space, time, and other needs while enjoying an activity. Let's say, for example, swimming. Then for the basic carrying capacity or the BCC, the parameters needed to identify BCC are the following. So the total size of the area used by the tourist and the standard or average space requirement of visitors. Then for the physical carrying capacity or the PCC, it was calculated by computing the rotation coefficient or RC of a specific tourism activity. So the RC was determined as the total number of hours the lake area was opened for recreational activity. So let's say, for example, swimming, and it is divided by the average number of hours the tourists enjoyed swimming. So the average number of hours the tourists enjoyed recreational activities was based on their responses obtained during the interviews. And the RCC, or the real carrying capacity, this is the maximum permissible number of uses of an area once limiting factors derived from the characteristics of the site have been applied. Okay, so RCC was computed by incorporating the limiting factors identified from the interviews and observation on sites. So the following limiting variables were incorporated. So typhoon, number of rainy days, available time for activities, and the quality of visits. Then for the next one, to assess the ecological carrying capacity, different parameters were determined that could affect the ecological carrying capacity of the two lakes. So the parameters listed were assigned weights using analytical hierarchy process. So the respondents were asked what is their priorities on these different parameters. Then we determine the weights of each parameter to come up the indicators, the different indicators. So we have three indicators: the socioeconomic indicators, the tourism indicators, and the water quality indicators. So the actual carrying capacity or value and the maximum carrying capacity for each indicators were determined. So the capacity level or the CS for each indicator were computed using the formula CCI, okay, which is the actual observation divided by the CCI max, which is the maximum carrying capacity. Then the capacity level or the CS were multiplied to the assigned weights, and the sum was obtained to get the carrying capacity for each indicators. So this mathematical model was based on the paper of Ding et al. In 2015. So the capacity level for the socioeconomic, for the tourism, and the water quality indicators were added to obtain the overall ecological carrying capacity of the lakes. And the resulting score were translated using the sustainability index shown in this table. So when the resulting score is less than 0 or negative, it means that the ecological carrying capacity is unsustainable, or the lake is unsustainable. Then 0 to 0.33, so low sustainability. Then 0.34 to 0.67, medium sustainability. 0.68 to 1, high sustainability. And greater than 1.01, there is very high sustainability. Okay, so now let's look at the results. So for the water quality determination, the dissolved oxygen level from August 2019 up to May 2021 is above the recommended level of the DNR, which is 5 ppm. Then for the pH level, it is also within the recommended limit of 6.5 to 9, which is ideal for freshwater lakes. Then for the temperature, is within the recommended limit of 25 to 31. Then for chlorophyll A, a value greater than 25 micrograms per liter is considered as eutrophic, or the water is very rich in nutrients. In the case of Lakes Pandin and Yambo, both are below 8 micrograms per liter, which signifies that the trophic status is oligotrophic, in which there is very low nutrients. Then for the transparency, as you can see, that the Lake Yambo has clearer water than Lake Pandin, and both lakes indicate good water transparency. Then for the biochemical oxygen demand, the BOD level is satisfactory and below the recommended level of DNR of 7 ppm. Then for the nitrates and phosphates, the lakes are still within or below the recommended level of 7 and 0.5 ppm. So to summarize, it suggests that lakes Pandin and Yambo are still in good condition in terms of the water quality. Then for the fish biodiversity, so the study revealed a higher diversity in Lake Yambo with a Shannon index of 1.76 with a species richness of 8, while Lake Pandin has only 0.56 Shannon index of diversity with a species richness of 4. Then in terms of the abundance of fish species collected from Lakes Yambo and Pandin, it shows that Glossogobius aureus, or the bia, was the most abundant in Lake Yambo, while Leptorophon, plumbeus or the ayungin was the most abundant in Lake Pandin. So this is the photograph of the Bia and the ayungin. Then for the macrophyte biodiversity, okay, so 5 macrophytes were recorded from Pandin and Yambo Lake. So we have the Hydrilla, the Ecornia, Pistia, Hippomea, and Nymphaea. So to compare the two lakes, okay, so Lake Pandin have 5 species of macrophytes while Yambo has only 4. Okay, Nymphaea was only found in Lake Pandin, and the two lakes showed an 80% Jacquard similarity index. Then in terms of the tourism carrying capacity, so 4 GPS points were plotted in Lake Pandin area, and it revealed that about 10,030 square meter was approximately used by the visitors. So the tourist respondents' preference on the space required per individual is 30 square meters with an estimated number of 10 people at a given time. Okay, so this was based on the infographics used during the face-to-face interview. And as you can see here, the computation of the BCC, PCC, and of course the real carrying capacity when it is compared to the 2015 to 2019 tourist arrival data, these RCC have not been exceeded so far. So meaning the tourism carrying capacity is still within the limit. Then for Lake Yambo, so same as Lake Pandin, it did not reach yet or it has not exceeded yet the real carrying capacity. It is based on the 2015 to 2019 arrival data. Then for the ecological carrying capacity or the ECC, these are the computed scores. So as you can see, this sum of the different indicators, the socioeconomic, the tourism carrying capacity, and the water quality carrying capacity for Lake Pandin is 1.21, while for Lake Yambo is 0.85. So to translate this into the sustainability, using the sustainability index, so for Lake Pandin, there is very high sustainability of the lake, while Yambo, there is high sustainability of the lake. So meaning the environmental quality is still high or good. So to conclude, so for the water quality, it is within the recommended standards set by the DNR. And for the fish and macrophyte biodiversity, there is high biodiversity in Lake Yambo compared to Lake Pandin. And Glossogobius aureus was the most abundant in Lake Yambo, while Lake Pteropon plumbeus was the most abundant in Lake Pandin. Then there is a total of 5 species of macrophytes were identified in Lake Pandin, and 4 were identified in Lake Yambo. Then Lake Pandin has high density, frequency, and dominance in terms of the macrophytes, and there is 80% similarity index with Lake Yambo. Then for the carrying capacity determination, the tourism carrying capacity of Lake Pandin and Yambo are not exceeding based on the real carrying capacity. And the ECC of Lake Pandin is very highly sustainable, while Lake Yambo is highly sustainable. So that's the result of our study. So thank you very much for listening.